Buttongate. Liberals offer up a coupon. Polls show a shift. Business leaders back conservatives, and so much more on election 2025. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. On the phone with me from our nation's capital in Ottawa, Ian Burns. Both of us a little bit under the weather because we have little ones around us, and they're just like little petri dishes offering up the next little virus all the time. So I may sound a little stuffy.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do about the child epidemic that we suffer from?
Traffic flowing nicely here in the Okanagan. Beautiful blue skies here, and beautiful, beautiful day in the Okanagan. How's it looking out there in the nation's capital?
Well, it was beautiful yesterday, very much like the day that you're blessed with there. But it's a bit grey, it's a bit dull. Not a very nice day really, but at least it's not snowing.
The big news. Well, no, let's. Yeah, the big news. We're gonna kick it off right away with the election because the weekend here. That's really what was happening all the time. Buttongate, the big Buttongate. We're gonna play this clip first, and we'll talk about it.
Accusing the Liberals of attempting to bring American-style politics to Canada. Liberal operatives reportedly planted buttons with divisive messages at a Conservative conference in Ottawa last week. But the campaign trick seems to have backfired. CBC's Kate McKenna broke the story and has more.
So last week I covered this conference, the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference, and it's an annual event where Conservatives from across the country come and meet and talk about issues. And while I was there, I noticed a couple of buttons that I thought were strange. One said, "Stop the Steal," which is an apparent reference to the 2020 movement to overturn the U.S. election results. And the other had the name Jenny Byrne crossed out and replaced with Corey Teneycke. Byrne is the Conservative campaign manager, and Teneycke is a longtime Conservative strategist who has been critical of the ongoing election campaign. So it's conceivable that people at this conference made these pins, and in fact, I spent time last week trying to prove that, but recently I learned it was an operation undertaken by the Liberal War Room itself. Two operatives went to the conference and planted these buttons, and in an attempt to tie Conservative supporters to the politically toxic Donald Trump. I was having dinner with friends, and I saw some people who I recognized to be Liberal staffers. I overheard the person next to me, a man, who had already identified himself as someone who was working in the Liberal War Room, and he's talking about how he was at the conference and planted these buttons in a Liberal campaign-sanctioned false flag operation. So I confronted him. He knew I was a journalist. I said, if you did that, then that's a story and I'll report it. At first, he conceded that he had said that, but once I said it was going to be a story, he denied having said anything at all. So I left shortly after, and then at a separate bar, a conservative.
There you go. You can go to CBC and listen to that whole clip there. It's almost like they're just like thinking like, well, if the media are so much in their pocket that they can even tell them that until she says, well, I'm going to do a story on it. Then it's all of a sudden change their mind.
Yeah, or he's just an extraordinarily unintelligent person that didn't realize what he was doing. But I mean, I think it's kind of being reported, isn't it? This is like just there, the woman, not McKenna, but the one who was in the studio. She referred to it as a trick, and I've heard that a lot. I mean, the initial Liberal Party statement was that it was kind of like a prank that had got out of hand or something like that. And I just think that's really underplaying what this is. This is an attempt, like McKenna said, it's a false flag operation. That's an extraordinarily serious thing to do. And it was an attempt, obviously, to derail and sabotage the Conservative Party's campaign. It was fundamentally anti-democratic. And you could even argue that something like this could lead not to a criminal prosecution, but a civil one. You could imagine this being a defamation case or something like that. I mean, it's a really serious misdeed.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they were hoping that the media would pick up on it and then tie Poilievre's camp to Trump, and that's clearly what the purpose was, and that's what that guy was bragging about. And so, yeah, I mean, some people on the far side would say, or like on the extreme side of this argument, would say this is clearly election interference.
Indeed, yeah, and I mean, this kind of thing, unfortunately, does happen quite often. I mean, usually when something like this happens, it's not orchestrated by people who are apparently so stupid that they need help to be fed or something like that. But it just seems like the person who ran this operation was absolutely dense and just should never have been given this responsibility.
Yeah.
But just think of all the times where somebody who actually is intelligent takes control of something like this. You would never know. If somebody smart was involved in something like this, you would never know. And it would just go out into the press. And then we would get the usual comment from the Conservatives. They say, no, we didn't do this. And then the sort of electorate would then have to make their mind up, even though the whole thing is fake.
Yeah, and again, these weren't just a couple of campaign volunteers that were working, for some obscure candidate in some far-off place. These were actually Liberal operatives working in the war room, and so they're high up in this thing. And at first, the Liberals tried to downplay it and said, it was just a prank. And then most recently, Mark Carney just made a statement on it and said he does not agree with it. And the Liberal punishment for this, reassigned. Not fired, not fired, reassigned.
Just promoted, maybe.
I mean, there was accusations during the trucker rally that, like that flag that was out there, that there was one Nazi flag that was put out there and it just showed up for a few photo ops and it was gone. That there was a lot of accusations that was a false flag operation as well.
Well, there was also a US Confederate battle flag there, which I just thought was surreal when I saw that. But definitely the swastika. When I saw that, and then there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever to, that suggested that person was involved with the trucker convoy, or even if he was, that he was acting with the sort of, the backing of anybody else rather than just himself. He also had a mask on, didn't he? Like a ninja mask.
Yeah.
So straight away, I just thought, I don't like the look of that. There's something very dodgy about that. And yet, in that instance, there wasn't a CBC story to reveal that was a false flag operation. Instead, it was something that the entire Liberal front bench, all the ministers, including the Prime Minister, repeatedly mentioned. And still, to this day, it's mentioned. You still see this come out of the mouths of Liberal Party operatives in an attempt to try and associate Pierre Poilievre effectively with Nazism, which is extraordinarily insane. But that is a good example, because that's an example where something that we should probably just automatically presume was a false flag op, because it's so weird and there was no evidence to ever suggest that it was like an actual Nazi, like something that doesn't even really exist anyway. But there's no suggestion, is there, that was an actual Nazi going around waving his Nazi flag because he loves Nazism. Therefore, we should probably assume that it was some devious actor that wanted to try and discredit this protest. And yet, that has kind of ended the discourse as though it was real, as though it actually happened. So that's what, those are the consequences if somebody's smart oversees an operation like that, which I assume in the case of the Nazi flag, that was somebody who was actually quite competent. Even though I would say, if I was advising somebody on a false flag operation, I'd say, don't take a Nazi flag. That's just ridiculous. Like, nobody likes Nazis. Nobody would go with a Nazi flag. Like, do something a bit more intelligent than a Nazi flag. But obviously, it still got Justin Trudeau excited, didn't it?
Even Robin Urbach from the Globe and Mail commented on the Buttongate thing, saying that this just shows the Liberal arrogance. And I would say that I would have to agree with Robin on that. Calling it a prank and just, a tricksters and stuff like that. It's far from a prank and a trick, because their intended outcome is likely more devious than a prank or a trick.
The intended outcome is to deceive the Canadian people into not voting for the Conservatives because they think that the Conservatives like Donald Trump. That is an attempt to it's an attempt to deceive the electorate and to poison Canadian democracy. It's, to think that they've just reassigned these people is insane. They've attempted to use lies and falsehoods to change the outcome of this election. That's abominable. like, these people should be named and shamed. It's a despicable thing to have done.
If you read the statement there in this tweet here, you can see this. After many news reports last week about conservative infighting and prominent Trump allies being hosted at the Canadian Conservative concert, it's been reported that Liberal campaigners created buttons poking fun at these reports, which regrettably got carried away. So they're saying in their explanation that it was, again, not taking responsibility for saying it was all because of the Conservatives that this poking fun thing. This is not poking fun. This is very serious, and this is how they react to it.
You have to just imagine an equivalent. Like, can you imagine if a Conservative Party operative had gone to some sort of Liberal-aligned conference and done something like, I don't know, I'm not actually sure off the top of my head what the equivalent would be. Maybe some sort of like kill the pipelines or something, or kill, landlock Alberta, as Karina Gould said herself about 10 years ago. Something along those lines. That would be, can you imagine that? I mean, that would be condemned, wouldn't it, in a very full-throated way by the Liberals. So, I mean, that just kind of highlights the hypocrisy as well, to try and play this down. The key though, obviously they're going to do that because they think that that's a media strategy. People will be telling them, like, let's just play it down. Carney will say sorry or whatever, and then we'll bury it and forget about it. They're gonna attempt that because they think that's going to work. The key is, will the media let this die? And will also the NDP and the Conservatives and all the rest of them, will they let it die as well? Or are they going to keep talking about it? Because if they don't keep talking about this, it will just die, and we'll forget about it in a week. This
reminds me of the Chinese interference on the candidate, where Carney was like fine with him until the candidate himself resigned. Resignation doesn't even go far enough. I mean, this is intending to mislead the Canadian voter. There's no doubt about it.
And quite ironic that they used the "stop the steal" phrase there when, had this actually, like, if you could imagine a situation where this election was kind of like the BC election, where, like, quite literally, like 10 votes or 20 votes decided who became the premier in this election that we've just had. If it was an election that close and this false flag hadn't been revealed until after the election, I think you would be not too crazy to suggest that it had effectively stolen the election. I know that sounds dramatic, but you could at least make that argument and be, still in your right mind, I would say. So that's kind of how extraordinary this is, and I think as a consequence, it should be punished accordingly.
This next one here, Canada alone in the dark, and we talk about this all the time. Bill C-18. We're trying to draw some attention to it, getting very little attention from the Liberals on it. The only Western nation where the news is still banned on Meta, especially during this important time in election, and the Liberals spending millions of dollars on Meta right now, breaking their boycott to get their message out there, because they say how they recognize how important social media is to getting news out there. Well, nearly 100 newsrooms, many local and community-based, are gone since the introduction of Bill C-18. I've got this on my LinkedIn here. If you can go ahead and read it. Even Bell Media laid off 4,800 employees in early 2024, citing Bill C-18 and industry pressures. This just gets worse and worse and worse. And the Liberal government deciding who to selectively support and who to silence, basically. It's so important, and it ties into this next clip here. And let's go play this next clip here.
Large American online platforms have become seas of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate in all its forms. And they're being used by criminals to harm our children. My government will act. And today we're announcing our plan to fight crime, to protect Canadians, and to build communities that are safe, secure, and strong. A plan to make Canada secure, to make Canada strong.
Are they talking about the ads they're putting on Meta, or what are they talking about there in the ads they put on all the other platforms? Or are they talking about what they've talked about in that they really want to ban X in Canada?
Yeah, or I mean, if you think about what sort of posts would end up being classed as hate, do you think? I mean, is there a possibility that posts that draw attention to the Liberal Party's former leader, Justin Trudeau, and his numerous racism scandals, such as dressing up as people from Africa and Asia, and I mean, it goes beyond that, but also his treatment of Geordie Wilson-Raybould as another example. Is that the sort of thing that they might classify as hatred? Because I have a feeling that they would. Certainly the picture where he's dressed as Aladdin or whatever and he's pulling a ghoulish face. I have a feeling that maybe that would somehow find itself classified as a hate-filled post or something like that. Because you're not supposed to draw attention to the Liberal Party's many, many examples of racism. You're just not meant to do that on anywhere, really. And if the Liberals have control of what's posted on the internet, what's posted on social media, then don't expect to see anything like that anymore.
Yeah, and like I said, they spend millions on Meta right now, and if it's the evil empire, remember they promised the boycott to support local journalism?
Yeah, they did say that, didn't they?
They did say that, and now they spend tons of money on their, well, they've basically suppressed media outlets in Canada. The freedom of the press is almost non-existent here in Canada right now because of we've lost an audience of over 200,000 because they took away our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Meta. We had the largest audience here in the Okanagan, and we earned that over 10 years serving our community. And they took that away with no compensation. They've selectively decided who to fund, so they selectively fund our competition. Well, they suppress our audience reach. And now they talk about even going after more platforms. And at the same time, they spend millions of dollars of government money and Liberal money on Meta.
Yeah, well, it's hard to summarize, isn't it? I think we've kind of struggled to summarize it, but basically, before this occurred, there was Facebook and Instagram, the two of the most powerful social media platforms in the world, and media companies, news companies, would post their stories on there, and it was responsible for a huge amount of traffic, sometimes 50-60% of a website's traffic. Then the Liberals started a fight with Meta. Meta retaliated by banning news on its platforms, and then the Liberal Party decided to give money to certain organisations that they decided were worthy of taxpayers' money. And then now they're giving money to Meta too. Now because they recognise, when I asked for a comment from the Privy Council, who was responsible for it, for the federal government, they recognise that it's just too important. It's just too big of a platform. Too many Canadians get their news and get their information from Facebook. So it's okay for them, obviously. It's okay for the government to go on there and to use taxpayers' money for the privilege. But still, we can't. So ourselves, just like many other media platforms now, effectively have had a gigantic hole blown in our revenue stream, effectively our business model. And there isn't really a way to operate in the 21st century in the news business unless you have platforms like Facebook to get your message out. That's the ultimate, that's the sort of the summary, I think, isn't it? You can't really operate without that unless you're somebody like CTV, I guess, and you're kind of just a channel on the news that everybody over the age of sort of 30 or, well, maybe 40 now knows about and will watch from time to time. Or unless the government has decided that it likes what you have to say and is therefore subsidizing the salaries of your reporters. It's such an ugly situation, I think, when you put it in plain English. It's really quite dreadful.
Yeah, it is tough because it's almost surreal. Like, it doesn't make sense because we're the only G7 nation, that has this happening right here. Everybody else has kind of worked something out, and close to 100 outlets have failed since the introduction of Bill C-18. More to fail here just in May here, 3 more to close in the Lower Mainland, completely close, and more will close. And again, as they selectively fund certain ones that are friendly to them, even in Carney's campaign, they put it out there that said to media when they were asking questions, careful the questions you ask, or we'll pull your funding. What a
But can
place
you
to
imagine?
be. What a place to be for media, right? Just careful your questions for the one party funds you and the other party says it's going to take away your funding. What a predicament to put media in.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes that CBC story all the more intriguing, doesn't it? That they went out and wrote a story that was very unfavourable to the Liberal Party, and they sort of felt the need to do it on principle, I think. But speaking of principle, can you imagine, just for a moment, being somebody like Mark Carney or any sort of high-ranking Liberal, and knowing that your party has inflicted this terrible wound on the Canadian media and forbidden them or prevented them from being able to use Facebook? You know that you've done that. You've spoken out about Facebook being a vile organization. Usually in terms like we've just heard, talking about like hate speech and all that sort of stuff. And then to see the situation, to see the suffering of the press, to have kind of stood your ground and called Facebook evil, and then to say, all right, we've got an election, lads. Let's just completely throw all of our principles into the incinerator and give loads of money to Facebook, this organization that we said is evil, this organization that we've made it impossible for Canadian newspaper or news organizations to post on. And then let's not say anything about it. And let's pretend that that's okay. I just think that is such, I mean, that has to be one of the most blatant immoral acts and hypocritical acts in Canadian politics in the last decade or something. That is an astonishing transgression, isn't it, of values and norms. And it just flies in the face of everything that we might have thought of as representing decency, I think. It's such a repulsive act of hypocrisy. It kind of it saddens me, I think, on one level that people could be capable of such duplicity.
I interviewed Holly Doan of the Blacklocks, and she also said that basically the path we're going towards is media that's left in Canada will become basically an arm of the government because the funding, all their funding will rely on it. To be fair, all outlets have lost half their traffic. All outlets have lost half their revenue. Just some are getting subsidized because Facebook is such a great contributor, and we willingly put our content on Facebook. Facebook did not steal any content from anybody. CTV, CBC, us. We willingly put our content on there in exchange for traffic. It is the Liberals that have decided what basically have choked off the media landscape. That image that we showed you in the beginning there, Canada alone in the dark, the only Western nation where news is banned. It less information for the people. And again, during wildfires in the Okanagan here, people can't get access to the information because they go to Facebook. And where's the information? Not there.
Yeah, and I mean, stories would go crazy on Facebook. That's the thing. I'm not talking about us necessarily here, but I'm just imagining this CBC story, for example. Not to kick CBC, but not many people really care about CBC, do they? Let's be honest. Their audiences aren't exactly through the roof. I don't think that many people in this country seek out cbc.ca every day. You know what I mean? So I think like this story that they've put out, for example, how many people are really going to see this story? Whereas if they still had access to Facebook, I can picture it now. I can cast my mind back to when you could put news stories on Facebook, and that would do crazy numbers. That would spread all over the internet, and we would get
a million reads on many of our stories. They took that away from us. And if people don't think this is a bad thing, media's job is to hold power accountable. Basically what they're doing is choking off that ability to hold power accountable. Think about it. That is what's really happening. They're choking off the ability for independent media outlets to hold power accountable.
And can you imagine if they weren't in power? Do you think that they would be sitting in opposition and just turning the other cheek, so to speak, and not having anything to say about Meta or this ban? I really don't think so. I think they would be screaming about this from the rooftops about the democratic deficit or whatever term they wanted to employ.
Yeah, we got a comment here said that this lady said that Bill C-18 is not censorship on Canadian news. Well, I don't know what it is if it isn't. So there you go. Look at the results of it, and then ask yourself that question. If you think it's actually helping media outlets, it's doing the opposite. It's putting them into their grave. So there you go. Let's move on to Mark Carney came out with Canada's Strong Pass. We're going to play this little clip here. This is their ad clip here for it. There you go, and it came with a press release too, and then here's a quote here from Mark Carney. At a time when our economy is under attack from President Trump, Canadians are stepping up, helping our neighbors, buying local, and celebrating our beautiful country. There you go. Maybe someone should remind the Mark Carney and the Liberals that Facebook, Meta, is not a Canadian company, and they're spending all their ad dollars there when they're supposed to be supporting local. And this Canada Strong Pass is basically a coupon. I mean, you take your kids to the museum all the time.
Yeah, and they get a cut rate anyway, so that it's not really, even when you have to pay, it's not anywhere near the price for an adult. And under twos don't have to pay as well. And this is only for 2 months. I mean, my reaction to this is, I'll quote Mark Carney, the bit that you just read out. At a time when our economy is under attack from President Trump, and then I'll add my own bit here and say, yeah, at this time, why are you devoting resources to something as insignificant as this? Why did you commission somebody to make this video about the Canada Strong Pass with Mark Carney awkwardly walking through the woods there? Why are you spending any time on this at all when, as you say, our economy is under attack from President Trump? There are people, quite serious people, economists, who are forecasting a depression next year. Not just a recession, not just a slight decline in GDP, but an actual full-blown depression and economic catastrophe and the end to globalization, possibly even the end of NATO as we know it if the Americans pull out. And we have Mark Carney here and the Liberal Party devoting energy and resources to advertising, a not particularly important policy, if I could put it that way. Why? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just commenting back to this one lady there saying that the Bill C-18 is. I'm trying to put that link into that story there. It doesn't seem to want to go in there. For some strange reason, maybe it's too long or something like that in the comment. There's a LinkedIn post there that you can go read. I don't know. Maybe Rommel can get it in there. I'll leave it for that.
The only thing I would say, I've just checked. I've just read that comment now. To respond to that, I would say, yeah, it's obviously not. It's not censorship in the sense that there isn't a law on the books that says you cannot write news stories or something like that. That's illegal. That's not we don't live in Russia or North Korea or China or somewhere like that. You can't do that in Canada. Obviously, it's just that is completely beyond the pale. There's no history of that. It's not possible to do that in a country like this. However, if you wanted to punish certain news outlets and reward certain other ones, and possibly push certain ones to the brink or even push them over the brink, in a society like Canada, a liberal democracy, you might, I'm not saying that this is necessarily what has happened, but you might conceive of something like this, something that on the face of it seems almost like it's virtuous. It's like we're going to make the big American tech companies pay and something about hate speech and blah, blah, blah. It almost makes sense, doesn't it, superficially? But it's not so much about what people say something is for. It's much more important to look at what actually happens, what it actually does. And what does Bill C-18 actually do? The answer is it kills independent media outlets. So you have to, sometimes you can't just expect things to be that literal. Like I say, we're not in North Korea. You can't do things like that in a state like this.
Yeah, you have to look at the result of what's happening, and that's where you're going to see most of the thing. And then this is something you put in here for Mark Carney pledges to shake up Canada's military procurement.
Yeah, well, he also says that he's going to create a new organization called the Bureau of Research, Engineering and Advanced Leadership in Science, which he says, or the Liberals say, is going to make sure that we can solve all the problems that we face in the military and in the world in Canada, including AI. But I mean, that seems a little bit optimistic, doesn't it, to think that you could kind of summon an AI sector out of thin air? But we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. And then this is the big story that broke over the weekend as well. And then the Liberals tried to portray it as a Donald Trump thing. And it was the Carney plant shutting down in Ontario, and they make the electric van, the Bright Drop. And here's Doug Ford's reaction to it.
What I understand from the president of General Motors that I spoke to, it's going to be about 500 employees. It has nothing to do with the tariffs, he said. The volume is not there. People are not purchasing like they thought they would. So they have thousands of vehicles.
But if we look, and here's our friend Justin Trudeau in the van, the Bright Drop. We got a picture of Justin in the van there. This is when the Liberals in Ontario gave close to $500 million to GM to fire up that plant, to retool it. That was back in April of 2022. They put $518 million tax dollars to support GM's retooling of that at a total cost for that plant retooling of $2.3 billion. But here's the tweets from Mark Carney first. Basically, talking about, we're going to fight Trump and all this stuff. And then Anita Anand comes out and says the same thing. We're going to fight. But this, and there's the next tweet there from Anita. We'll never stop fighting for Canada's auto sector, Canadian workers, and Canada's economic sovereignty. This plant closure has nothing to do with tariffs. And GM said it. Doug Ford said it. And here's, the statement from GM says that they're just not selling. This closure will affect 1,200 employees, and then they're going to come back in October with reduced capacity because they've got parking lots full of these vans sitting there that they're just not selling, these electric vans.
I mean, how many times can we see the same thing happen and still let it happen again and again? Like, how many times are we gonna see governments in Canada hurl taxpayers' money, hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, at gigantic international firms, who then, in a couple of years, not only do they sort of fail, but then they just fire everyone, which was the whole point of the money in the first place. How many times are we going to witness that, and then just sort of let it happen, So then another company will come in. I'm sure, like Honda or somebody, they're going to come in and they'll be like, okay, here's $5 billion, and this will create loads of jobs. And then in 3 years' time, it's a failure. Everybody's fired, and the money's still gone. I mean, is it not obvious that this isn't really working?
Yeah, in this case, the Liberals tried to use this again to amp up more hate for Trump and more, because that's their secret weapon right now. The more they can kind of excite Canadians into this, this Trump war. But this is actually an embarrassment to what they did with $518 million of your tax dollars. This is their problem. They created this. They funded this. And the reason for the closure is because they're not selling. And if they don't get rid of the EV mandates in Canada like they did in the United States, and they've relaxed in the UK even, it'll be the end of the auto sector in Canada. They don't talk about that. And that's the question that the reporters should be asking. Will you end the EV mandates in Canada? Because this auto sector
Yeah, I
thing,
mean, still hasn't
this
been asked.
this closure of the CAMI plant has nothing to do with Trump and tariffs, and everything to do with just a bad investment.
Indeed, and it's such a shame that all of that money, that's a huge amount of money, $500 million in this particular case. But I mean, there are many examples. It really does pile up. But just in this specific case, $500 million, you can do a lot with money like that, can't you? You can really do a lot. And it's just such a shame that, you know, unintelligent people wasted that money without any real scrutiny from the population. It's just such a shame. It's such a shame that so much money and so much resources can be wasted by stupid, mediocre people.
I think the question reporters should be asking Anita and Mark is, are you trying to distract Canadians from the real issue here? You're trying to make this look like a Trump tariff thing for a win for you, when it's actually, this is again another bad investment that the Liberal government has made with Canadian tax dollars?
Yeah.
There you go. There's the question that should be asked. Pierre Poilievre comes out with a policy statement too, and we're going to do more of these policies. We're going to do all the policy stuff that come out. The Carney one we'll talk about. We can break down that the Free Museum one later. But here's Poilievre's policy statement on multiple of murderers.
And someone who takes multiple lives should be held accountable for each one. That's why I'm announcing today a Conservative government will reintroduce and pass the law that empowered judges to impose consecutive sentences for killers convicted of multiple murders. The worst mass murderers should never be allowed back on our streets. For them, a life sentence should mean what it says, a life sentence. They should only come out in a box. We will do this using Parliament's legitimate constitutional authority under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that allows Parliament to act to protect the charter rights of Canadians. And let me talk about those charter rights. I am here today to defend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, particularly for law-abiding Canadians and victims of crime. The Liberals have systematically violated the charter rights of Canadians to life, liberty, and security of the person, as defined in Section 7. By allowing repeat murderers back out on the street, Liberals are violating the right.
There you go. You can go watch that full statement too by Paul. We're going to break it down later. We're going to do all the policies that come out from the Conservatives and the Liberals.
Carney was asked about that just now in a press conference that I watched, and he focused on the threat that Poilievre made to use the notwithstanding clause to push this sort of thing through, this sort of harsher punishment, which I don't know. I'm not sure that that was necessarily politically wise of Carney there. I think people really do want multiple, mass murderers, let's call them what they are, people who commit more than one murder. People do want them to be in prison for life, and it is kind of
when they
bit wacky, isn't it, that they get automatic parole? I mean, what is going on?
We can all remember the bit of turmoil there with Paul Bernardo and that justice, and he's back in Carney's camp too.
Yeah, but it's something that the Europeans do this as well, and it's just always a little bit sort of grotesque, isn't it? It's kind of like that repulsive human being, Anders Breivik, who murdered I think it was 90 people or something like that in Norway. For people like that to be treated as though they deserve protection under constitutions and so on, and that they deserve things like parole, that's just, I think that you've got lost, haven't you? Your moral compass isn't working anymore if you think that people like that should be treated with that kind of privilege, the privilege of freedom after they do something like that. It's so I think that's kind of, I would imagine that's kind of a win for Poilievre there if we're thinking about how they've reacted. But again, as I've said many times, the polls seem to suggest that people still prefer Mr. Carney. So what do I know?
Paul, Jagmeet Singh says, don't count him out. they're seeing a bit of a resurgence as well there. This is a Holly Dome Blacklock story. He urged electors know that their vote does matter, and we'll repeat that over and over and over again. Your vote really matters. This is the time when they actually look at all the stuff they're promising. Everybody's promising stuff, some more than others, but this is the time when they actually are listening, right? And this is the time to make sure that you're heard. But the NDP not doing so well. The records show the NDP vote count declined but stabilized since the Orange Crush campaign of Jack Layton of 14 years ago. Jack Layton, in 2011, the party won like 4.5 million votes, and they had 103 MPs. Look at that, eh? 2015, they dropped down to 3.5 million and had 44 MPs. In 2019, under Singh, they just won just under 3 million votes and 24 MPs. And in 2023, basically stayed at the same thing with 25 MPs. And, this is not looking good for the NDP right now because they're not differentiating themselves. And Jagmeet Singh just kind of says stuff that just doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes.
I would also say, most obviously, you're right. Yeah, this is bad news for the NDP. But I would also say this is bad news for the Conservative Party as well. Mm-hmm. Because the people that are not voting for the NDP this time around are almost certainly going to vote for the Liberal Party. And if the left is not split between the NDP, the Greens and the Liberals, then it becomes that much harder for the Tories to get in because they're relatively united. I suppose you have Maxime Bernier's party, but that's pretty obscure, isn't it, these days? I don't think that's going to be much of an effect on the Tories' campaign. But they kind of need the Liberals and the NDP to, or at least the NDP. They need the NDP to do well because then that bleeds Liberal support, doesn't it?
We got some comments here from Blanchette. We're going to play this clip here.
I believe that Mr. Carney is trying to get a free ride. He got a lot of momentum at the beginning of the campaign, and they tried to hide him as much as possible, which seems to be pretty easy because he seems to be quite preposterous. I believe that Canadians will do the same as Quebecers do, but they will make their own answers about it. It's not mine to interfere in their election. But the campaign, the shortest possible prime minister candidate for the Liberals, as seldom seen as possible, saying as little as possible and hiding as much as possible, including his participation in the so-called green fund, which actually is 50% oil and gas. There's some questions to be asked, and April 16th and April 17th will be quite a party.
There you go, from the Bloc. Not big fans of Mark Carney.
Yeah, well, since Mark Carney turned up, he was on track to do very, very well in Quebec. I think he was on track to, at one point, he was on track to be the official opposition, wasn't he? It was supposed to be, the polls were suggesting a gigantic Tory majority with the Bloc as the opposition, and the Liberals just, and NDP just wiped out. So I think he's a bit miffed, isn't he? He's a bit upset that all his votes have been taken from him by Carney. But yeah, there's just so much about Quebec, isn't there? It's kind of, even though it is a very large part of Canada in population terms and obviously geographically as well, it's the largest province. It's still kind of, it's a little bit over the top, isn't it? Just how much we have to talk about Quebec. But
yeah, lots being made of the polls, though. Lots being made of the polls. And recently, even on an interview on CBC, they were saying maybe the polls are wrong and maybe misleading. And Dan McTeague, former Liberal MP, said as well that they seem to be polling a lot of the older generation in the polls and not a lot of the younger generations, and that's why maybe it's skewed. But here's a new Main Street poll that actually shows the Conservatives pulling ahead.
Yeah, another unusual one, another kind of anomalous poll. But definitely, if you look at the kind of, you're going 338 Canada, for example, and you look at the graph, because they just kind of chart all of the polls but just about all of them anyway. And then they kind of put it on a graph. You can see that it's definitely starting to narrow. There's no doubt about that. So, I mean, and you'd kind of expect that, wouldn't you? Because he has had a honeymoon period, I would say, Mr. Carney, and all honeymoon periods come to an end. I guess their wager is that it will last long enough to see them over the line, but we'll have to wait and see.
Because the disclosure thing is still a big issue, and then it's becoming a bigger issue. There's the next piece we're going to put up here, Time for Change, and this is a bunch of Canadians, business leaders, coming out and endorsing Pierre Poilievre. We've seen lots of unions endorse Pierre Poilievre, and now we're seeing a lot of big names in Canada endorsing, business names endorsing Pierre Poilievre, and police unions endorsing Pierre Poilievre. So this thing is being shared all across. You can find it all over on the internet, on X and on LinkedIn, and it's on my LinkedIn as well, and on I imagine Facebook. I never go on Facebook, so there's that, right?
It's made the news as well, for sure. But I do wonder what, how much influence that's going to have. Really, I don't know. I think Mark Carney's almost like established himself as, you know, the kind of the most respectable man in Canada, hasn't he? The most credentialed man in Canada, and I feel like all of this backing probably doesn't negate that sort of power that he has, Mr. Carney, the power inside of the average Canadian's mind.
Well, here's a clip from Michael Barrett. He introduced Pierre Poilievre at an event in his riding here. We're going to play this clip from Michael Barrett.
Remember, it was Mark Carney who advised Trudeau to open up the spending taps, making everything more expensive for Canadians. Why would he do that? Well, here's a clue. In 2022, while most Canadians were watching the value of their paychecks collapse under an avalanche of inflation, Brookfield CEO wrote to his shareholders to gloat about how much money they were making off of inflation. Brookfield CEO said, and I quote, "Many of our infrastructure, renewables, and real estate assets are positioned to benefit from inflation," end quote. And in 2023, he wrote to shareholders again to say that, quote, "The stress in the market is our sweet spot," end quote. Your pain was his gain. As Trudeau's economic advisor, Carney was supposed to be working for Canadians. But his advice to Trudeau made you poorer, while he lined his own pockets and the pockets of his rich friends.
There you go. There's a lot more of that. Michael Barrett there talking in his introduction. You can go watch that. I'll also put it on. You can find it everywhere. This is everywhere on the internet. Another Holly Doan Blacklock story. Trudeau's out at the foundation of the Pierre Trudeau Foundation. The Trudeau Foundation has passed a 15-month federal audit and cut all ties with the Trudeau family. Alexander Trudeau, the former Prime Minister's brother, was replaced after endorsing a 6-figure donation from none other than the Chinese Communist Party.
Friends of the Chinese Communist Party.
There you go. More ties, eh? Who would have thought?
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to ignore now, I think, isn't it? Well, it's been impossible to ignore for many years. But undeniably, there is some sort of fondness within the Chinese Communist Party for the Liberal Party. It's not possible to deny that now. The only question is why.
Alexander Trudeau, in his 2023 testimony before the Commons Ethics Committee, said he never questioned the donation from the Millennium Golden Eagle International Beijing firm affiliated with the state-run China Central Television and Communist Youth League. Well, see, they just have a Chinese Central Television. That's what we're going to have left in Canada with Bill C-18. And then, maybe with this new bill they're putting out there to ban all the social platforms, we'll just have one central television network. That'll be great, won't it?
That we can rename CBC to that. Central
And he
Central
he's
Broadcasting Corporation.
and he said he had no reason to believe that their motives were not honorable. Hey, take anybody's money, I guess. Just like they, right?
I mean, there's a lot of this all over the place, isn't there? And it isn't just China. I mean, the oil-rich states in the Gulf, they do this kind of thing as well. But for some reason, they go under the radar. But the Chinese, probably it's good that this is the case. But the Chinese, it's a very sensitive subject now, isn't it? But yeah, this is one of many such actions from the Chinese Communist Party or friends of the Chinese Communist Party.
Donald Trump back in the news. He's backing off on his tariffs, giving a 90-day pause to most countries other than China and Canada, and but also backed off a lot of the stuff in China with electronics. But he's saying not so for Chinese-made phones and other electronics not exempt from the tariffs. So there you go.
It almost, at this point, it's almost like every time Donald Trump sees green in the stock markets and he sees people start to talk about stability, he does something to inject instability. At this point, it's been too many times now, and there's too much sort of two-facedness. So the White House will come out, they'll say something. It's like, oh great, okay, Bob's your uncle. Like, I'll go invest my money now in the stock market. And then 2 days later or something, Trump comes out and he's like, nah, just kidding. And then it goes back to being red again. There's just something, I have a feeling that there's something going on there. Like, I think he, for some bizarre reason, whether it's to do with him trying to pressure the Fed to lower rates or whatever, I don't know what it is, but this does seem to be intentional at this point.
There you go. We're going to pass on this editorial one. We'll talk about it later. We might put it up on the site here later today, but we just didn't have the time to talk about it right now. Let's move on to markets, though. Like you said, markets up, down, sideways, right? Right now, the markets are currently up 109 points. They were up higher for a bit this morning. Definitely a little volatile. Gold off, though. Gold off this morning. Gold off. Where is it sitting exactly right at this moment? Gold is off by, and when gold's off, it would be a sign that things are probably starting to stabilize a little bit. But gold currently at 3207, which is pretty close to what this chart is showing. And then Bitcoin looking like it wants to go up the charts here. Looks like it wants to go back to its challenge, that $100,000 mark again. So. And then the Canadian dollar showing strength, mainly because the US dollar showing weakness. But there you go. Canadian dollar looking good. The best it's looked in a long time.
So now there are new reasons to not go to the, although there's one fewer reason to not go to the US in this summer.
There you go. In our AI and tech section, ChatGPT remembers everything you say. And it does. I use it every day, and it sure does. Like, you can continue discussions and remember stuff that you said to it. I know so many people now that use it on a daily basis.
It really does remember. I mean, a long time ago, months ago, I asked it some questions about a novel that I just read. And it brings that up all the time. Constantly brings up that one novel. For some reason, it's kind of obsesses about it, but it certainly reveals that it has a long memory.
One of the things you can do for it, if you're feeling down, you can say, hey, can you pump my tires? It does a great job of pumping your tires based on your past conversations with it as well.
Yeah, and as I told you, I don't know if you've done it yet, but you can also, if you outsmart it, if you kind of bully it, you can get it to estimate your IQ as well.
Well, I'll have to try that one. See if I can get above 60 this time. EVs. In our EV section here, we got Tesla now driving right off the assembly line. They've driven over like 50,000 miles. These cars and trucks have driven off the assembly line by themselves, and they go park in the storage lots. Check the. There you go. You don't need to play too much. But yeah, so they're now driving themselves into the parking lots ready to be loaded for a shipment. That's pretty wild, eh? We never thought we'd see the day when right off the assembly line, the car just goes and drives itself off into the parking lot. Pretty wild, eh?
It just can't come soon enough for me. This I want to finally retire as a driver. I'm counting down the days.
Yeah. In our fun section, in the meme section, here you go. China retaliates against tariffs by putting worse fortunes in the cookies. You know, when I was a youngster, I used to believe in the fortune cookie thing. So there you go.
I've always found them a bit unedifying. I have to be honest. I've never found them even on their own terms. I've not thought that they were very good. I prefer Christmas crackers myself.
And some of the mainstream media in the United States is now saying that Trump is only responsible when the stock market goes down, not when it goes up. So they want to clarify their position there. And then, and I have to agree with this one here. Life hack, get real Starbucks taste at home by dumping hot water over cigarette ashes. There you go.
Starbucks coffee, one thing I'll say is, I'm pretty sort of ambivalent about Starbucks coffee, but I would say it is very caffeinated, isn't it? It's very strong. And I think that's actually true. You can find there's evidence of that they put in a huge amount of caffeine.
I might need that today. I'm feeling a little under the weather and a little kind of like dozy, taking a lot of Tylenol and stuff. So there you go.
Get yourself to Starbucks and take $25 and you'll get a nice small coffee.
Nice, yeah. There you go. Yeah, and then there is an editorial that you and I will talk about. I would like to put it up and talk about our energy resources. Energy is the greatest Canadian asset that we have, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out here. We do thank you for being a part of our news. And we do enjoy the comments for sure. And we'd love you to share, subscribe, do all those things that you're supposed to do. You know, if you're here on YouTube lots, you know that the like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. And follow us on X and follow us here. And hopefully both of us are feeling better tomorrow. And we have a better tomorrow. The debates are coming right up though, too. The debates are coming right up. And
in French first, so make sure you get your French to English dictionary out.
And then Ian and I will be back later today, and we'll break down another platform. We did housing already, so it's on Kelowna Now Media's YouTube, and we also did the tax policies. So you can go find those. We should just do one on free tickets, coupons. Liberals are going to win that one. Sure. All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.